I have a philosophical question.
Oh, what?
Is a dream that doesn't come true a lie or something worse?
So a dream as in what, though?
Like
Is this
an
a riddle?
ambition.
Oh, ambition. A dream that doesn't come true. What was the last part?
Is it a lie or something worse? But I just wanted to use this to segue into saying that I've been listening to like loads of Bruce Springsteen, and I love him.
I don't know who that is.
He's like a famous rock star.
I don't know.
From like New Jersey.
Okay.
And like it's very like Americana, but in a like critical way of America. But I got into him because I was watching Sopranos again, and there's like loads of Bruce Springsteen race. He's so famous. Have you ever heard of the song Born to Run?
Probably if you played some of it, I might do.
Or like Thunder Road, or like...
Yeah, these sound familiar. These sounds like concepts I've heard of before.
He's one of the most famous... Never mind.
I'm not very good at music.
He's one of the most famous artists of all time.
I'm sorry.
But I fall in love with him. And he's so corny and American, and I kind of hate myself for liking him, but I do.
Good for you, man.
Yeah. Alester Crowley.
I guess we should probably start by saying that we have approached this episode in a slightly different way. You know, we're sort of experimenting with formats and seeing what works the best. Normally, we both research a topic, and then we sort of share our opinions and thoughts at the end on the podcast. But today, Ralph has done all of the research. I've done a little bit, but, you know, nothing crazy. I've just listened to a few podcasts and a few episodes of whatnot on Alester Crowley. But just to give me some background, Ralph has actually dived deep, and I think you know more about him anyway, just because you're interested in him and magic.
I wouldn't even say I've dived deep. I read a fictional book.
Yes. Well, his fictional book.
Yeah.
So I guess this is more of a book club episode, because you're going to be telling me about the book that you read.
Yes.
And I know nothing about it.
And yeah, I was going to talk about the book, talk about my experiences with it, how it like linked back to like the chaos magic episode we did when we first started, and so on.
Yeah, sounds good.
And like just what I know about the person. I was thinking like we could do this like, because he's written 2 fictional books, so we could, if this works, we could do another one about his fictional book, like Rum Diaries, and we could make this episode just talking about the man and like as like a famous occult figure and what we make of that, and how like that's interesting that he's probably the last famous occult figure, I would say.
I don't know many occult figures, not ones that come to mind anyway, but then I'd have not done any research on this, so I wouldn't be able to agree or disagree.
Then we could talk about... Yeah, well, it'll be an episode.
Let's see where it goes.
Yeah.
It's a bit more loose this time, trying things out.
Yeah, exactly. Think of it as a relaxed sitting around talking about a book with a couple of people who haven't, well, one person who's read it, and like most book clubs, the other people haven't, but turned up anyway. So, yeah.
I'm here.
So the book is called Moonchild. It was published, well, it was written in 1917, but it was published in 1928. At the beginning, it's a whole thing. There's a little paragraph about him being like, yep, I am a person who wanted World War I not to happen. So there might be a little divergence into World War I talk. Sorry about that. And it turns out at the time he was writing for a German propaganda magazine.
Just a side on this, and I know we're kind of like diving deep into this when we're trying to keep it a bit service level, but anyway, didn't he kind of say that he inadvertently caused World War I?
Yes, and that's in the book too.
Is it? Okay. Well, I'm sorry for diving ahead. Please continue.
But I have to admit, towards the last 75 pages, a lot of it became World War I centric, and I lost interest, so I haven't read it, all of it. But I skimmed through the last little bit because I just couldn't.
How big is the book?
It's only 300 pages.
Oh, okay.
But it's one of those books that if you read 5 pages, you're like, I have just lost an hour of my life. Like, this is so...
It's dense.
Yeah, some of it is. Some of it's like really actually moves. You can tell he was off his face on drugs. Like some of it moves at a pace and is really fun to read. But then it's a tale of two books, I would say, in the sense that one of it's like a kind of very pulpy, very silly magicians versus black magicians adventure story.
Okay.
And the other half is him spewing his philosophy on magic and Thelema and the world and magic principles. And my God, those sections are hard to get through.
So is it kind of like some fiction, or is it?
It's a fictional book, but with his philosophy intertwined with it.
I see.
So it's very self-insert fiction, and that was the other thing that I found hilarious about the book, is you can see that this is a man with the ego the size of Mars, because he has two people who are clearly self-insert characters. Not one, but two. And the first one is a guy whose name I can't remember, called something. And he's like...
Where is that?
He's like this, I should really look that up, I will in a second, but I want to finish my point. But he's like this young, incredibly attractive, incredibly smart, dashing, did I mention attractive, genius who is wild and full of passion and fire and wants to like use his magical flaming sword to like cut down the walls of society and move the world into another eon.
My goodness.
Yeah.
He sounds intense.
And then there's another character who's older and wiser and very wise, very centered, very principled, has no flaws, but maybe... Oh, he is a sexist, but I don't think that was a flaw. I think that's just because this was written in the 1970s.
Right.
Not 1970s, 1910s.
Yeah.
And Alester Crowley was probably sexist. And they're both quite clearly self-insert characters because they talk exactly the same. And you can just tell that he's like, yep, these are both me.
Interesting.
I am the most interesting man in the world, and these are the two sides of myself, and I am both of them.
That's kind of an interesting concept for me. I quite like that. Not the fact that they're self-insert characters, but the fact that, like, you know, one has gone through this journey and become the other and become much more wise and self-centered rather than, like, very out there and trying to change the world and things. But is that how it came across to you?
Yeah, it also just came across as, like, because, like, they both follow his principle, which is a principle of Thelema, and they're in a thelematic, like secret society.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just tell, like, the guy's just like, I am so fucking awesome. Like,
for listeners, for those who don't know, Thelema is the religion that Crowley's centered.
Philosophy, religion, way of doing magic. It's a cross between all three.
Okay.
He says he didn't come up with it himself. He scribed it from like an Egyptian god, but...
Oh, right. The Egyptian gods that spoke to him.
Yeah.
I see. I guess they told him about it. And
yes, yeah. And he...
in a vision.
Yeah, and he wrote it down. Yeah, it's... And the whole of it is do as thou wilt under the guise of love or some crap.
Do as thy will. I've heard that.
Yeah. And love is the law, that's the other thing.
So what actually happens in the book?
Right. So there's these two wizards and they've come up with an idea for... Oh, we should say, and I've always wanted to say this on the podcast, but spoilers.
Oh, spoilers for the book.
Over 100-year-old book. But it's really obscure, so I don't know how many people would have read it. I'll try not to spoil too much because it is kind of a fun read in a way. It's also incredibly tedious. But... So there's these two wizards who are doing this thing where they want to bring into the world a Moonchild. So they have to impregnate this woman.
What is a Moonchild? First question. What is a Moonchild?
So the Moonchild is the next spiritual evolution of humanity. Okay. And he's going to be born and be like a super genius who's going to move the world to its next stage of existence.
Right. And are these two wizards, are they the guys that you were talking about?
Yeah, the two self-insert.
Oh, wow. They were literally working together as protagonists.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there's these people from the Black Lodge, this dark magical society, who are trying to stop them because they aren't enlightened enough to understand why it would be a good thing. And to bring in this Moonchild, they have to go soul fishing in the fourth dimension because the soul is oh my god, this is where it gets into like dense magical theory that I did not understand, and I'm pretty sure it's like part of his religion. But like the soul is like this eternal, amazing thing that we all have, but because we're so indoctrinated into humanity by our upbringing and society, we can't access the soul's full knowledge. So by doing the Moonchild ritual, which they're doing, they're going to be able to bring a soul in with more knowledge of itself, and therefore it's going to be a genius.
Oh, so it's kind of like we only use 10% of our brains, but we're going to get someone who can use like 100% of the brains.
Yeah, but a spiritual way.
But in a
like we
in
can't
a
access
soul way.
our soul's knowledge, but our soul chooses, like the soul.
So is the soul like an ancestral thing?
No, it's like a float. It's like it's got a will of its own.
Okay.
And like each soul chooses each person it wants to be inhabited. It wants to inhabit. So say, according to the book, your soul wanted to adventure, it would inhabit a baby with the
someone who was going to be an adventurer.
No, because it would make them into that, but like it would be like through breeding, like say that like his two parents were super muscular and super fit, it would like choose that, or say the soul was like lazy, it would choose.
So they're basically like little personalities.
Yeah.
And they inhabit a body of which is most likely to fulfill their personality of what they want.
From what I could understand.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
But I didn't really understand it. So
okay.
I might be wrong on all of this to be fair.
Yeah, it sounds like a concept I'm okay with for the moment. It's not too difficult, I guess.
And then the book's about them like fighting off like dark magicians and trying to do the Moonchild ritual, and
did they do it in the end?
From what I understand, they failed and caused World War One.
Oh, that's the World War One thing.
Yeah.
I see.
And then the last 50 pages is Crowley moaning about World War One.
Wow.
And the plot sort of just ends.
Sounds like a Stephen King novel.
No, he is not as good a writer as Stephen King.
As in it's on track to start with, and then it kind of goes off the rails.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a woman called Lisa who falls in love with the young, fiery, amazing wizard, and she's not really a character as much as a plot device, but the protagonist of the book is her. Like, you're the person whose point of view is you're following.
Oh, okay, interesting.
For most of the book, but it's mostly just her being very stupid and everyone telling how she's amazing.
Oh. Okay.
There's not a lot of showing and not telling, and like there'll just be there'll be these characters that are introduced, and then Crowley will write 4 pages on them, and they will never come back again. And you're like, well, I just learned this person's whole life story for no reason. There's a large chunk of the book that's just them going into how they disproved fake mystics and like scams. I think like Alester Crowley was very aware that what he was doing could be called fake, so he like kept in the book. He was like, see, like I know what fake is. I'm now telling you how like I think when this was written, there was a lot of like pretend in real life. Like there was a lot of people like talking to the dead or pretending to move things.
Right.
A lot of like hustlers in London and stuff. And Aleister Crowley being like, all of that's fake. My shit, this is real, and here's how you differentiate.
This is the real deal.
And yeah, it's at points like kind of witty and funny and like enjoyable, and at other points it's this very dry, very incredibly dry talking about like thelema and philosophy. And
it's weird. It kind of sounds a bit like a fiction novel intertwined with a pamphlet on how he does magic and how his religion is.
Exactly what it is.
That's weird.
And if I'm being honest, I just wish it was a bit more pulpy and fun and had less of the magic stuff. But the magic stuff is a thing that is in it.
So do you know how well this book sold?
Badly.
Oh, okay.
So he wrote it in 1917, but he didn't publish it till 1928, because in 1928 he's basically out of money. I think it came out to actual, like, quite critically good reviews. I think it sold all right, but I don't think it, like, really... I don't think it was, like, the break. I think he thought, I can release a novel and then I'll be
made.
Yeah, because I'm amazing at everything, so all I have to do is put out some novel and then I'll be rich.
He did have a big ego.
Like, yes, that, like, in every... This is my main takeaway from the book. In every single aspect of that book, this is a man utterly in love with his brain. Like, that dude, if I could have his confidence, I'd probably be an asshole. But you can see why he was a man who thought he could, like, change shit into, like, gold in his mouthpiece. He thought he was amazing.
Yeah, he definitely did, from what I've heard and read about him, he definitely did everything. What is it? I remember last podcast on the left talking about how he sat down when he was like 22 or said, what am I going to be? Am I going to be a diplomat?
Yeah.
Am I going to be some part of the aristocracy? Like what am I going to be? And like all of these different options, like on these like highbrow politicians or, not many people can do that, obviously they're kind of like, I'm going to be a graphic designer rather than I'm going to be
a retail store.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or like just let life happen to them rather than being like, I'm going to be a politician and I have decided that I'm going to be, or, this very important person.
So, for instance, here's an example of... Oh, I wanted to say, like, back to what you said, like, talking about, like, him being like, I could be this and this and this. Like, I think that comes from arrogance and also the fact that he was, like, a rich white man in the late 1800s, early 1900s.
He did have a lot of money as well.
Yeah, and he was very learned. So he probably could have just been like, must be whatever the fuck I want, because that seems how things worked back in the day.
Yeah, maybe that's more of the time than what I'm thinking of. But he also was an avid mountain climber as well.
You get that from the book, because every single simile he uses is about, like, mountain shit. It's so funny, because he's like the mountain that climbs up to the sky, and at the top there's only black ice at the top of mountains. That was what is in the man's heart. Or like...
It's a very unrelatable metaphor. Not many people have climbed mountains, and I didn't know anything about black ice being at the top of them.
No, he could just be making that up. But he's like, and like the mountain climber, it's up to him to organise the exploration accordingly, and that is how Simon Gregory... I need to work out what the name of that character was. He's the main character. I've read this whole book.
Yeah, you should work that out before we continue, because otherwise we're going to be like, who was that guy?
But it's like, and that's how the man organised his mind, like that of the avid mountain climber. It's like, I don't know. Stop talking about mountain climbing. It's hard not to think of the man as a slight genius, because, like, some of the shit he wrote out in the, like, philosophical sections, but, like, this is a fault of mine, that I assume that everyone born before the 1960s was, idiot. I don't know why I do that, but it's hard, like, history sounds so horrible to me. I'm like, well, they must have all just been, like...
Like cretins.
Raging savages.
Like your town folk.
Exactly. I think they couldn't have known how to write, because, like, in my mind, like, anything before the 1960s, there was no education or music or joy or hobbies or...
The 1960s was, like, so close.
Yeah,
you got the whole of history.
Maybe before, like, World War II.
That's still so modern.
Yeah.
You have the Greeks who, like, invented writing and calendar and sundial.
Yeah, like, how dumb must they have been to not have writing before that? Like, they must have just...
Well, I don't know, if you're, like, someone who doesn't have writing, creating writing seems like a big thing, right?
Yeah.
That would be like me creating something that doesn't exist yet.
Yeah, I think... Yeah. But still... In my head, it was just all like a wasteland of horror. Apart from, I read a lot...
I mean, I'm sure it was. It just they were quite clever about it as well.
Maybe.
Carry on, obviously.
Yeah. So, like, here's an aspect of the dry shit I was talking about. I'm just going to read a paragraph. And imagine reading about, like, dark magicians and light magicians and like fun little escapades with like. So there was this bit in the book which I actually really enjoyed and thought was quite well written, where they took Lisa, the protagonist, to a dark magician's hideout. And in retrospect, I don't know why they brought her there because there was absolutely no reason to. And if the dark magician got a bit of her blood, then it could kill her.
Ah.
And they were doing this seance where the two detectives, who were the goodies, were trying to like keep her from getting cut. And as Lisa's a fucking idiot through the entire book, every single trick that the dark magicians used, she fell for. So, for instance, when they told her, they're like, Lisa, no matter what, do not put yourself in any situation where you could get even a drop of blood spilled. Okay? Okay? All right? Got it? You got it? You got it. Okay, you got it. You got it. All right. We're going to go in now. Don't. And then they go in and one of the people is like, hi, Lisa, reaches out his hand with like sharp nails and she's like, hello! And then
I thought you were going to say something like, would you like to chop my onions for me?
it goes on. And then like the mystic, so they were going to a mystic who was like trying to prove that she could tell the future. And then the mystic pretends to be a baby because it's like multiple personalities and they can all tell the future and it's all like a big hoax and stuff. Oh. And then she's like, I'm a baby, come over and hold me. And Lisa's like, okay. And they're like, nope, don't do that. And then another time, there's like a guy pretends to fall over and Lisa's like, I'm going to go help him up. And you're like, oh my God, you fucking idiot, why?
She just sounds too kind for her own good.
Yeah, but it's quite fun because like the two, Simon If and the other guy, are like cleverly busy. It's all through this like very middle class veneer of, politeness, like slowly like kind of like not letting them cut her by being like, oh, instead of like if you shaking her hand, I'll shake yours and like I'll shake her hand, so we've done it through mutual whatever. And then when the baby's like, come and hold me, they're like, sometimes babies have sharp nails, so let me like file your nails down before you can come and hold her. And it's kind of like almost like Sherlock Holmesian in the way it goes back and forth.
I see.
Which is kind of fun. I forget what I was talking about. Oh yeah, so that's the like kind of bit of the book I enjoyed. And like there's these like little adventure sections, but then it goes into like the driest philosophy.
The pamphlet.
Yes. Here's an example of him talking about genius.
Okay.
All our little great men, our one poem poets, our one picture painters, have merely failed to perfect themselves as instruments. The genius who wrote The Ancient Mariner is no less sublime than he who wrote The Tempest, but Coleridge had some incapacity to catch and express the thoughts of his genius, was ever such a wooden stuff as his conscious work, while Shakespeare had the knack of acquiring the knowledge necessary to the expression of every conceivable harmony. No full stops.
Wow.
Necessary of every conceivable harmony, and his technique was sufficiently fluid to describe with ease. Thus we have two equal angles, one good secretary, the other with a bad one. I think this is the only explanation of genius. In extreme cases of Lavina King, it stands out as the one thinkable.
Okay.
Was that easy to follow?
No. What can I tell you what I think it means?
Yes.
I think it means you have to be a master of everything to be considered a genius, rather than just one thing. Because if you're just master of one thing, you can make a great thing, but you can't market that thing, is what I'm getting from that. Was that completely wrong?
Yes.
Okay.
Because he goes on to say, I don't say, went on the mystic, that the genius and his artist are not inseparably, there you go. Connected. It may be a little more closely than the horse and his rider, but there is at least distinction to be drawn. And here is a point for you to consider. The genius appears to have all the knowledge, all illumination, actually you might be right, and to be limited merely by the powers of the medium's mind. Even this is not always the bar. How often? And so on.
And so on, and so on.
I don't really... In short, the genius appears to be... here we go. In short, the genius appears to be a being of another plane, a soul of light and immortality. I know that much of this may be explained by supposing what I have called genius to be a bodily substance in which the consciousness of the whole race in particular time may have been active under certain stimuli, stimuli. There is much to be said for this view. Language itself confirms it. So I think what he was getting at is that the genius does the work, because if you remember what I said about souls being genius, and we all have a genius in us, but because we're like constricted by environment and society that we can't do it. I think what he was getting at is a genius is someone who can fully tap into a little bit more of their soul,
right?
While the non-genius has too many things still in the way, and they haven't done the work necessarily to untap the genius. That's why Coleridge, when he wrote Rime of the Ancient Mariner, he only wrote it when he was fucked out of his skull on like opium, because he's
more in touch with the soul.
Yeah, at that point. But when he's conscious, he can't. But Shakespeare was more in touch with the soul always, so the genius flowed out with him more fully.
Right. Okay.
And that is one section of the like kind of magical philosophy that he talks about. And that is about every 10 pages of the book, where it stops being a book and becomes...
Let me tell you about magic.
Yes. And it's like no full stops when I'm doing this. I will forget how punctuation works.
Just a stream of consciousness.
Yeah, you can also tell he was on opiate while he wrote this book, because the plot moves around so much. He's like, we're here. Now we're here.
Fun.
Oh, and we're here now.
You know what it reminds me of is my dad wrote a porno. Like, we were in London near the old clock tower, and now we're over here in Heathrow Airport. And it's like, wait, when did time pass between these two chapters?
I will say he's actually, in his way, quite a talented writer.
Yeah.
When he's not doing the magical stuff. Like, the prose is quite bouncy and funny, and like he has this cynical air to everything he's saying. So even when he's doing the like two self-insert, let me rank myself off characters, it's all through this kind of pomposity air from his prose, where you're just like, it all has this faint aura of self-mocking, which I found quite enjoyable. But he does hate women. Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me, to be honest.
And it's so funny because you can tell this is so desperately what he wants his life to be like. Also, to loop back, the main character's name is Cyril Gray. Please don't stop listening because I don't remember characters' names. I swear I read this book. And I read all the books.
All the books? Ever?
Yes.
Wow.
With the name of Moonchild, written by Alester Crowley.
Oh, that lessens it slightly.
So all one of them.
All of the one book.
Yes. And I did skim through the last 75 pages of it.
Yeah, what were the last 75 pages? Like, just, you said about World War One?
Yeah, mostly him moaning about World War One.
So how does that intertwine with the characters? Or they just finished the book and he's like, now let me tell you about World War One.
No, it's more like, so they do the ritual and then it all goes wrong because of like black magic, and then World War One happens and then he's like, here's why this is a bad thing. And you're like, well, I guess you're on the right side of history thinking World War One's a bad thing, despite the fact you were writing for German propaganda while it was happening.
Yeah, why did they allow him to write that?
They didn't really. He was like banned from England and like labelled a traitor, and but his excuse was he was like, I was writing such silly stuff that they can't have thought. I think that's also why he published the book, because it's so funny. I'll read you out the like beginning of it, because this is when like this was published after he was labelled a traitor. Okay. And I feel like some of the book was maybe at least this first bit was being like, look, I told you, I'm on your side, England. And in fairness, I do feel like he was on England's side. He's a very patriotic man in his own way.
Oh, yes.
So, here's the first bit. Here's the author's note. This book was written in 1917. During such leisure as my efforts to bring America into the war on our side allowed me. Again, at the time he was writing for German propaganda. Hence my illusions on the subject, and sad showing off Simon If at the end. Need I add that, as the book itself demonstrates beyond all doubt, all persons and incidents, I am purely for England as the figment of my imaginations.
Right, okay.
So he really, the man wanted you to know that he was on England's side in World War One, and nobody can say differently because he wrote it as an author's note.
Right. But how do you mean he was also writing for German propaganda? So he was writing other things for German propaganda? Yeah,
he was writing at the time for a German propaganda magazine as his day job to earn money.
I see.
And that's kind of followed him everywhere because it's sort of a bad thing to do if you're from England. It'd be like someone, I'm not going to go into that, but yeah.
Yeah. I understand the ramifications of that.
Someone from PS5. I mean, I don't really need to do an example.
No,
yeah, it's very obvious why it's a bad thing. At least it was World War One, where the Germans weren't out and out evil like they were in that.
Yeah.
World War Two.
I guess so. Wasn't he like for Hitler as well at some point?
No, not really.
Oh, really? Okay, that's contradictory to what I've heard.
No, he was...
Didn't he try to get that's it. He tried to get Hitler to join his religion. Or thought about it, potentially. I'm not sure if they actually tried it.
I don't think he was all that for Hitler. Because again, he's quite a patriotic man, like middle class, rich white men tend to be that kind of like... from that time period.
Generalising.
From that time period.
Probably
where he's all like... Posh... Bloody England, hurrah, hurrah.
What?
God save the Queen, what? Pip,
I see.
Tally ho.
Yeah. Penny farthing.
Yeah, exactly. I think, like, if anything, he probably liked Hitler for his showmanship and respected the con of it.
He did like extremes.
Yeah.
If there's anything that I know about Alester Crowley is he did everything to excess and to extreme. And I think that he appreciated Hitler's extremity, I suppose.
Kind of, but Crowley in his way was actually I don't think as evil as he portrayed himself to be, and if you research the man, he was clearly a quite terrible person. But he's interesting as a man, because he is a quite clearly terrible person. But he's not an evil person. Like, he's just rich, and he's kind of like BoJack Horseman in a way.
God, I love that show.
Same. But he's just someone who was born into wealth, never really had to, like, mature, and does shitty things and is very self-centered and doesn't care about the people around him all that much, but isn't actively trying to damage people. People just sort of get damaged by being near him because he's a complete and utter narcissist and doesn't give a shit about anyone. And then when you like things in extremes... If you're a narcissist and don't give a shit and are trying to do everything to the extreme, anyone in your orbit who gets taken in by you is he's quite a charming man. Even in the prose of this book, you can tell if you were to speak to him, he'd be quite a charming man to be around.
Huh.
Probably going to be damaged by him. He really is like BoJack Horseman, because BoJack Horseman's like quite charming. He's very funny. He's very witty, but he's a total narcissist and is an addict and just like a black hole. Which destroys everything around him.
Yeah, I actually, when you were describing that, I was like, you could well be talking about BoJack Horseman, actually, because it is very much of that kind of personality. Right. And everyone being hurt in the orbit is very akin, I believe.
I reckon you can make an amazing comedy series out of Aleister Crowley's life in a similar vein to BoJack Horseman.
Do it, man.
Yeah. When we, like, run out of ideas for this, and, like, the show just becomes about, like, in like episode 200, where we're like, let's just compare BoJack Horseman and Aleister Crowley.
I mean, that's alternately where we're heading.
Yeah, it'd be funny. Or like when I'm like, let's do a whole episode on Bloodborne because there's left hand and right hand magic theories in that.
No, we're not talking about fucking Bloodborne.
We will.
I hear enough of it off air.
We will. In like episode 300, I will wear you down over the next 10 years of doing this.
Oh my lord.
I forget my point. So what else would you like to know about the book or Aleister Crowley?
So
I'm not an expert on either.
Okay, but I'll ask the questions anyway.
Yes.
See if you can respond to them. Where was he in his life when he published the book, and where was he when he wrote the book? Because they obviously came out at different times to when he wrote them.
So I think he wrote the book when he was like on just he was quite young when he wrote the book. He wasn't too far into like his magical. Wait, no, I might be wrong about this. I think it was about like he was doing well. He was at the like when the book was written. I'm pretty sure he was like at the height of his creative, magical powers.
I see.
I don't mean powers as like I'm not saying like he was like a most powerful wizard. I mean I think he was like getting the most written. He was like writing
productive.
He was like writing his most important works like about Thelema and stuff. And when he published it, I think that was like his money was dwindling. His like influence was dwindling a little bit. He wasn't like doing too well. I know he had completely and utterly run out of money, which is why he published it.
I do remember that being one of the key parts in his life.
Yeah.
He kind of like lived hand to mouth for a while and then just...
He blew £7 million. Like the equivalent of today's £7 million.
It's a lot of money to burn through. Yeah.
I could do it though.
I mean, I think anyone could easily, now. Back then, it seems harder to do so, but...
Yeah, I wonder.
I mean, you could just spend it all on Bitcoin now.
I don't know what that is, and I never will. I've had like my friend...
I don't know what that is, and I won't respond to it.
Yes. I've had my friend sit me down and be like, well, if you need to like get into this, we can make money. And I was like, he was trying to explain it to me, and I was just like...
Wait, your friend was trying to, like, cocaine style explain Bitcoin to you?
He wasn't on cocaine.
He sounds like he was. Ralph, sit down, I need to tell you something.
He's very, like, he has made, like, I think, like, £1,000 from, like, good Bitcoin investments. But then I think he lost, like, 2,000.
So... his net worth kind of, not the best, really, when it comes to that. That's just gambling.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, that's like someone saying...
I said it was.
This is like a wonderful person, like, he's so good at gambling, but he's actually net worth lost $2,000. Like, what? Or $1,000, I guess.
What stocks essentially are.
Yeah, I mean,
gambling.
Bitcoin is kind of stocks. I don't want to get into this on a podcast because I might be horrifically wrong about all of this. But we might be horrifically wrong about all of the subjects that we cover, so I'm not sure why I'm so precious about this one.
It's a really funny story though. He sat me down and he explained it for ages, but it's like, and I was just there like at the end of it, and it's like coins, like pennies. He's like, no, for fuck's sake. I wasn't even drunk at that point. It was like a sober lunch coffee meetup. So what were we talking about? Yeah. So he had blown £7 million and he was like, well, I know I can publish this and I'll be like a famous author if I publish anything. So
and then
talented at everything.
He just wasn't.
No, I don't think it sold well. And I know he like printed it on the most expensive paper and...
I remember the last podcast on Left talking about like he just took so much pride in his work that he printed it on the most expensive paper, which basically outpriced all of his audience because it was ridiculously expensive to buy anything that he wrote. And
and then I think he probably did do it cheaper, but it was like mass produced, I think, as a book goes. But it just wasn't like he's fucking obscure. He wasn't obscure, he's quite famous, but he's still just a wizard. Like, I don't imagine many people like in 1928 like, do you know what I want to do? I want to read a half thriller, half very dry thing about the fourth dimension and souls book, and about a man who, you know, is gay and a traitor to the country.
Yeah.
I mean, not saying as gay. It was a bad thing back then to be gay.
Oh, it was illegal.
Yeah.
Well, he wasn't gay. He was, I guess, for a better, he's bi.
But it came out that like he was in lots of gay relationships and had sexual relations, and I don't think
I guess bi is not really a thing.
Yeah,
there,
I don't imagine the people back then were like, sexuality's a spectrum. It's complicated, you know.
That's true. I guess like if you've had one homosexual relationship that kind of says he's a homosexual, and then that would be it. Like you wouldn't get to sort of fight that back.
People still believe that to this day.
That's mad.
But, yeah. So that's where he was.
Why do you think Alester Crowley is still remembered to this day? Because whenever I listen to a long form podcast about him, and it is always long form because there's so much to cover, and I really don't feel like we're doing it justice in this episode because obviously we're not doing a blow by blow of his life, and I don't really intend to either because he has such a long, varied life.
I would say if you want a blow by blow, and there is lots of blowing, then go listen to like the last podcast thingy. But those 4 episodes I think they did on him were like amazing. I think it's some of their best work.
I do highly recommend those episodes of Last Podcast on the Left.
I don't think we'd be able to. Yeah, there's just no point. Like, just go listen to that. Like,
yeah, they've already done it much, much better than we could ever do it.
They didn't really talk about Moonchild, and I am talking about that.
That's true. We're specifically talking about the book. But it's very difficult to put this strange, obscure book title in a kind of arena that anyone would understand without knowing something about the man himself.
Exactly, which I don't think it's a bad thing we're talking about the man himself.
Oh, no.
But
I feel that we need to, but there's so much to him.
Yes.
Like I said, all the podcasts I listen to are long form because there is so much to cover. I don't think you could do like a short 20 minutes on Alester Crowley because there is just so much to cover. And there are so many main points in his life of which so much stuff happens. You know, he's very much involved in different relationships. He travels around the world. He writes for different things.
Like a fictional character.
Yes.
Which I can see why he self-inserted himself into it. Because if you glorify his life, it is sort of amazing. Like, he was born rich and then used that money instead of like just being a stodgy nobleman in England. He like went traveling, went to like almost every country, climbed mountains, like invented a cult, religion.
Invented sex magic.
Yeah, had lots of sex, tried to eat shit, got hooked on opium, and died toothless and old and miserable like we all do.
But he is a very strange character. I mean, I don't necessarily say there's one, you know, like when you listen to a podcast or read a book on someone, they had this grand thing that they did, like they climbed Everest or they did this one sort of momentous peak in their life.
I would say if you wanted to, like, say he did this amazing thing, he did, like, the whole... How do I put this? I think because he was such a person, such a character, he's probably the reason things like chaos magic and occultism is still around, like, still quite popular. It's not popular because obviously it's such a niche thing, but it's still, like, there's subreddits dedicated to Thelema, and there's, like, subreddits. I don't think chaos magic would exist without him. I think that's the thing. If you wanted to, like, narrow it down and really to say, like, why is this man so famous? It's because before, like, magic was absolutely a secret thing that nobody knew. It was a secret society and it was a hush-hush completely under the table, and Aleister Crowley was like to the world, like, I'm a magician, bitches. Like, here's how you do this shit, here's what ceremonial magic is, I'm gonna write book after book after book, and I'm going to publish them all, and they're going to be accessible for everyone, and people can know what magic is, and we should all be doing it, and if everyone was like Thelemic, the world would like go into the next eon, and it's all going to be amazing, and, you know, you're all going to become gods through me, and here it is, world. If you want it, you can access it, all thanks to me.
That's pretty cool, actually. They made magic accessible.
Yeah. I think that is what he did to an extent, because he just wanted to be a celebrity. I think I don't think it was like I want to help the common man, it's not fair that people don't know magic, you know, it should be accessible for everyone. I think he was just like, man, I just want to be famous and a celebrity, and here's a niche in the market. And
he definitely found that niche, didn't he? He definitely inserted himself into something that no one else was really doing to that scale.
Yeah, like, famous people at the time, like W.B. Yeats and Oscar Wilde, they were in the like Golden Order Society. I don't think that's right. Whatever secret order.
Hermetic order?
Yeah, whatever secret order he was in. They were in there with him, but again, that was very hush-hush, and he was just like, look at me, world, I'm a wizard.
I'm a wizard.
Yeah. And you can be too. You just have to follow my unreadable works. I'm making it accessible. No one can get through these, but I'm doing it.
They sound very open to interpretation, which in itself is kind of magical.
I think it's a very specific philosophy that I just don't understand.
Maybe it's just the way he writes it.
Yeah.
That's interpretable.
So I would say that's probably the thing why he's probably still known to this day. And also, like, he's an interesting, like, a fucking...
He is interesting.
Addict who climbed mountains is pretty cool.
He had a very interesting, colourful life.
Yeah.
And I like that description, that he was the one who made magic accessible to the masses. And probably is a big influence as to why magic is like it is today.
Yes, and like there can be subreddits about it, and me and you can sit here and talk about it and have like resource tools.
That's it, and have a podcast dedicated to it.
Yeah, and other
sort
stuff.
Of. Yeah.
But we feel like.
Yeah.
I kind of fell in love with him a little bit doing more research, because like he is awful and has done terrible things and is maybe a sociopath, but there was something like he's just so like this was in the late 1800s where he, and like early 1900s. I mean, it takes a certain amount of balls and showmanship to be like, I am the great beast 666. Like, I am the wickedest man in the world. I am the villain of the world. Like
and to do that in real life, rather than, you know, someone on a forum where you just be sort of confined to a corner of the internet for the rest of your days.
And actually live like he's not the great beast in the sense that he wasn't a murderer. He didn't. I mean, 2 of his kids did die, but that was through neglect, not like on purpose murder. So that makes it okay.
Yeah, on purpose murder, my favorite kind.
Neglect, but like, you know. If I was high on heroin all the time, I'd probably neglect children. But,
I mean, I think you need the harrowing, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah, I don't think I would let a child die if I didn't have heroin. But I can't be sure.
Let's not test the theory.
Yeah, no, this is why I'm never having kids. I think if you have to debate with yourself if you'd let them die without heroin or with heroin, you probably shouldn't have kids.
It's a sliding scale.
So what was my point? But I did kind of fall in love with him a little bit. Because, like, he lived it to an extent. Like, he did the sex magic, and he had lots of gay sex, and he did eat shit, and he did write the stuff, and he did... Like, you read the book, and the philosophy is insane, but then you think, like, this was written back in the 1917, and then, like, some of the, like, conceptual... fourth dimension, soul stuff, like that's probably all scientifically wrong, but it's still so fucking imaginative and
he seems like he lived with earnest, and he, you know, it wasn't one of these things like people would go like, oh, he ate shit, and then just kind of went like behind it. Like he was like, nope, I ate shit.
Yeah, he was very much honest. He lived without shame.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say.
That's a good way of putting it.
I mean, he did, like, shy away from the gay stuff, but that's only because he could get arrested.
Yeah, but he did and he didn't, because, you know, it's very clear and obvious and documented that he was very much a homosexual.
Yeah.
Or at least into men.
Yeah. By the way, I mean, he literally fled from England, like, when it happened. And, like Oscar Wilde, who, like, stood up and went to prison for Crowley, was like, I shall shun all consequences to this. But in fairness, like, he should. It's not fucking wrong to sleep with men. He was just ahead of the time.
He was.
And, like, you gotta respect that about a person who, like, he wanted to do magic, so he let men have sex with him. And have sex with men. So, and, like, I felt that reading the book too. I'm talking a lot. Reading the book too, I was like, I kind of hate this person because, again, the ego in every single bit of prose was dripping of, like, I'm amazing. Here's my grand philosophy on the soul, which I will spend 10 pages saying inarticulately and unreadably. But also, like, it's like, oh, he's so funny. So, yes. I would say Moonchild is a fun little book.
I can't say I'm going to read it, but I got the impression from you that it was a fun book, and I enjoyed hearing your rendition of it.
It was so pulpy, and, like, if you're into... If you have, like, an itch for, like, pulpy witchcraft stuff, it sort of scratches it. And, like, I learned... It's interesting, like, looking at it, like, the Thelema stuff compared to the chaos magic stuff, and, like... Even though I didn't really understand any of his philosophies, I'm maybe just not as intelligent as I think I am. I still found it interesting, if very dry. Yes. Any other questions?
No, I think we've pretty much covered that one. We have been speaking for almost an hour on it. So, yeah, cool. I feel like, yeah, well done. Nice one. That was good. We should do book club episodes more often.
Yeah, that would be fun. Like, he's got another fiction book we could do one on in the future, and then...
Yeah, we could get into that one.
Yeah.
We'll see what the response to this episode is like.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Then we may do the next one.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you everyone for listening. This has been Journey into Strange.
I've been Mal.
And I've been Kaz. See you later.